this would be a cool place for younger folks or folks that are really passionate about boats.
There's so much opportunity here, and there's so few deals like this.
Being able to sell these things off in a condominium type structure can be an interesting exit strategy.
This is one of the more favored asset classes in the country.
A lot of nuance and a lot of tricks to a deal like this, I think has plenty of upside if you know what you're doing. And in this one, that's not me. Welcome to Real Estate Anonymous, the place where real estate junkies get their fix. We had a terrific episode today with a guest host, Gelena Wasserman, Gelena, one of the friends of the show and a terrific developer of multifamily buildings in Los Angeles, California. We'll hear a little bit about what she's up to over there, and then we'll take a trip to sultry South Florida, Brett Moss's backyard, and look at a super quirky deal that marries a marina with a RV park. Check us out, leave comments, let us know what you think about the deal. You'll hear what Brett has to say and Gelena has to say if this is a buy or not. Thanks for tuning in. Your team is the most valuable part of your real estate business, and hiring the right people is crucial. But finding the best candidates on LinkedIn is tough, and as investors, we don't have time to headhunt. That's where Bullpen comes in. Bullpen is a staffing and recruiting firm dedicated to the commercial real estate industry. They support your talent needs from freelancer placements to full-time recruiting and executive search. Bullpen understands our unique business needs and shares best practices from around the industry. If you're looking to grow your team beyond what a job board can offer, I highly recommend Bullpen. Visit bullpenre.com to get started. That's bullpenre.com. Welcome to Real Estate Anonymous. We've got a great addition to the program. Somebody I'm a huge fan of, Gelena, a wonderful and prominent developer of some of the coolest projects, multifamily projects that I've seen in LA. And we're gonna take a trip down to South Florida. But before we do that, Gelena, thanks for taking the time. Busy mom, developer, ass kicker. I'd love you to share a little bit about your incredible story and how in the world you've been able to build and reposition so many of these projects in a market like LA.
Yeah, I started doing office sales and leasing at Colliers International right out of college in 2008. Very lucky time to start. Very challenging time to start. Actually, I was doing
in LA. You were doing it in LA.
In Encino, to be exact, and I was doing representing a lot of tech and entertainment clients on the tenant rep side. And then waiting tables at night to pay my bills at a place called LA Food Show that was started by Rick and Larry, the founders of California Pizza Kitchen. So did that for about 7 years and bought a single family home from a seller that became a dear friend of mine, but he ended up carrying some paper and sold the house to me for $400K. I got a loan from Logic's credit union as an income property, and the house was like not habitable at all. I staged it with rugs where there were holes in the ground. We put tile in the bathroom, and when the appraiser came and asked to use the restroom, there was like a fake toilet, wasn't even hooked up. Told him he could not use the restroom. Anyway, it all worked out.
He could go outside though, right?
Yeah, I was like, we're still working on our renovations, but, come back, in about 30 days. But that house ended up appraising for $565K, and we were under contract for $400. And so we got a lot of offers. It was West Toluca Lake, an area that I was really fond of. But most folks, just the spec builders were not there yet. So did that one, bought the lot next door, did that one. Realized it took a lot of work to do just one house. And so ended up buying a church property that I ended up building 9 units. And that was an interesting property because it was 2 properties across the street from one another, tied with a covenant for parking. and I put that under contract for $900K, sold the lot across the street to a fourplex developer for $400K. So we started at a very good land basis. It just goes to show that you make your money on the buy. And then we, rinse and repeat.
Okay, well, rinse and repeat from waiting tables to, seriously, how many units have you guys built, or have you built?
We're at about 1,000.
It's incredible. And starting, I mean, that time frame is so compressed. So you actually got started with multifamily what year?
I started it in multifamily about the first one, 2015.
Incredible. So yeah, 1,000 units starting from a dead stop in one of the hardest, most competitive markets in the country. And so the and you've kind of focused on the uber cool segment of the market, I would say, sort of the premium design, premium pricing, I'm assuming. Is that a fair statement?
No, we're not in the luxury market. When I went into multifamily, I was renting an apartment in Brentwood on McLennan. And I'm smiling because I know the owners really well, and they were a great landlord to us, and they've owned generational property. They've owned it for many, many, many decades. But the apartment was so drab. Everything was just so vanilla. And so when I went into the multifamily space, I was trying to put a design-centric spin on the apartments that I wanted to feel, resemble, and look kind of what I would want to rent. And so I would not say we're at the very top of where rents are. I would say we're somewhere in the middle, the high mid-tier for rentals.
But I'd say design forward. Is that a fair statement? Yeah. And in your I guess a side business, you've kind of got a dynamic duo relationship with Keith Wasserman, who's how did you guys meet?
Super dynamic. We're married.
Very dynamic.
Interesting conversations at the dinner table for sure. We met. I cold called his dad. Yeah. So I cold called his dad. I was a broker doing office sales and leasing, and his family still owns the property located in Tarzan. It's a shopping center, but it had a bank space, and the bank had gone under. And I had a physical therapy tenant that was very well known in the area. They needed a swimming pool. And there was no subterranean parking for a section of that property, and they wanted to be on the prime Ventura Boulevard main stretch. Which this was. So I cold called his dad to see if they would lease the property to my tenant, if that was an option. And his father finally one day picks up the phone and starts grilling me on how old are you and what do you do and where do you live, and starts telling me that he has a son and he's buying properties in Bakersfield, and I'm like, really could care less.
But then Keith smelled the deal and came in for the close, or how did that?
Well, so his father smelled the deal and then he, to go open the building, it was vacant, to go open the building and allow me to pre-tour it on behalf of my client. And so I got to the building, and Keith was there, and he asked, do I happen to know where the broker is? And told him I was the broker, and he was very taken aback. I was 22 years old at the time, and and then Keith went in for the kill immediately. I mean, I think his third question was, do you have a boyfriend? Are you Jewish? What do your parents do? He's pre-qualified.
How about a first date, Keith? Maybe we can talk about this over a drink. But I think one of the things that Gelena just said, which is great for new brokers, it's a lot of cold calling. You think you're calling for business, whether it's leasing business or potentially sales business. But I think this should be a great lesson for any young brokers or any brokers that are on this call, where cold calling could lead to some life brokerage decisions like getting married to a potential buyer.
Yeah. You get a
Yeah,
husband
so
or a
this
wife.
is a great motivation for people to pick up the 900-pound phone and start making cold calls.
But dad was the broker in this deal, right? Did he want a fee on that?
He did. He's still looking for
Okay.
his commission. He's received 3 grandchildren. So hopefully we've paid our debts and then some.
Oh, that's great.
I love it. What a cool story. Okay, let's move. You had an idea, Gelena, of a wacky story of a deal that is a marina and RV park, Fort Lauderdale. We know a few bits and pieces about it. Brett, why don't you drag up the website and talk us through, being Florida man, talk us through what we're looking at.
Sure. So being the Florida man, I don't know much about much except jean shorts and tank tops, as we talked about last week. But the deal's in Fort Lauderdale, so Southeast Florida. And I think as you guys can see, as the audience can see with the pictures here, a lot of boats here, a lot of fancy boats, and that is a huge part of the lifestyle. And Fort Lauderdale in particular, I think one of the unique things about this is you've also got RV pads here, which seems a little incongruent, but I think we're going to talk through how maybe this is pieced together.
Yeah, this deal really excites me only because there's so much opportunity here and there's so few deals like this. And when I say deals, I mean RV parks on the water with boat slips.
Agreed.
And the sociology of this, the psychographic. We talked a little bit offline of the motor coach owner driver, the Venn diagram of motor coach owner drivers and yacht owners seems like a pretty small overlap. What do you have any opinions on that, Gelena?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of experience. I mean, very little. We did an RV park in Marina that was right on the beach, 68 RV pads, full hookups, and then we expanded and built an additional 28 RV pads. Ended up selling that to Equity Lifestyle. But for this particular site, the RVers are not boaters, and boaters are not RVers. It's a lifestyle RVing. If you know, you know. Do any of you guys RV? Have you RV?
I took a trip a couple months. I don't know if this is full RV. A couple months into COVID, I think it was early May, and I was like, I've got to get out of here. So we rented a Sprinter van and drove to Eric's hometown of Atlanta and just had meetings outside of the Sprinter van because we were in the middle of COVID. And that dog hunted so well. And was people that wouldn't even call us back for the 2 prior years were like, wait, you're in town, come over to my house. So people were just so desperate to get together with people, but I had a blast. I mean, it was awesome, but that was just a little Sprinter van thing.
There's a guy in Phoenix. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember his name. Fantastic marketing, but he's a strip center buyer. Yeah. And has created the whole thing about riding around in the motor coach. What's that cat's name? And he's
strip mall.
He drives around in it looks like a country singer motor coach with the full office. This was the deal, and I'll come to your property and write you an offer. Wow. Anyway, fantastic. Okay, keep going.
That's great marketing. So yeah. I want to pull the audience too, because I want to see who has RV'd, who wants to do it, who has done it. Where did you go? Drop us a comment. So for this particular site, when I looked at this, I was like, God, how do you marry this site and make it all flow? Because the boaters, if you zoom into the photo of the boaters, these are not cheap boats. These are folks that charter, normally 6 figures just a week, depending on the size for some of these boats. And look, these RVs too, they're fairly expensive, but there's a lot going on here. I mean, how many RV spaces were there? It's like 300, just a click under 300. And I think they're all full service hookup, which is key when you're RVing. You want to be able to hook up all of your utilities so you can shower, use the bathroom, and so forth. But I almost view this as running this as a community land development type play where you have different branches. So you could sell some RV spaces, and do like a co-ownership with folks. I think you could add some more boat slip spaces. And then I think it's all about the amenities and the services that are provided, which is what they're trying to do, or tried, by adding the clubhouse and the pool and several other amenities. I mean, would you guys stay here?
Yeah.
I would.
No, so going back to my super cool Sprinter van deal, with the first couple of RV parks we stayed at, I wouldn't get out of the van in the first one. And my business partner was like, dude, what's your problem? Like, get out of this van. I'm like, I'm not getting out of this van. This is crazy. But then when we were coming back, we stayed at like a super high end one outside of Savannah. And I mean, restaurant, pools, everything that Gelena just said. I mean, I didn't want to leave the next day.
Right. Yeah, that bar and the restaurant that they were building is great. I would say most RVers are like you. They tend to stay to their pad, if you will, and they do their cookouts and their barbecues, because remember, the RV has everything you could need. The gym, that's a great amenity feature. I wonder how much of all of these amenities actually gets used. Also, too, when you're chartering a boat or you own a boat like that, it comes with staff. So normally they're making meals for you and taking care of everything on the boat. So I don't know that they have a need for a business center and some of these other amenities that are here. But yeah, Eric, what are your thoughts?
I love boats. I did a charter once. And as you're talking about, got back from a fabulous trip through the Caribbean. We get back to the dock, and I'm watching the guy at the dock refill the boat that's been out for a week, and watching the numbers spin on that diesel thing, and I was like, wow, that's a lot of money going through there. Wonder if I have to pay for that. And then it kind of hit me that in fact I did have to pay for that.
You already did.
And I started getting a little nauseous, and then finally it stopped, and I was regaining my composure, and I said, "Man, that's a lot of diesel fuel." And the guy on the dock said, "Yep, we're halfway done. Just have to fill up the other tank."
So like that.
So if you're looking for a furnace to get rid of some cash, spend some time on a boat.
What's the saying, Eric? If you have to ask what the real estate taxes are in this house, you can't afford it. If you have to ask how much does it cost to fill up this boat with gas, you ain't affording that either.
If you're worried about buying the gas, you don't have any business being on this boat.
You're at the wrong party.
Which was me for sure.
Well, and I think, Gelena, going back to your comment, which I think there is parallels back to the multifamily space where the amenities are great, right? I honestly think amenities or clubhouses is where the decision is made to rent an apartment. The super cool pool, fitness center, whatever else is going on in clubhouses today. But I think the reality of this situation is residents don't use a lot of that. It just kind of seems like a cool place to invite your friends over. But I agree that I don't know how many of these things get actually used, but it's one of those things, if you were making the decision, you'd say, wow, a very American thing. If some amenities are good, more are better.
Yeah, that seems to be the thought process, I think, of most developers. They're comping things out and they're looking at another building and it has a checklist, pool, gym, rooftop deck, whatever it is. And so then they just replicate that without really thinking of, well, who's your user? What do they look like? What do they think like? Where do they shop? What do they wear? And those are all questions that I'm asking myself as we build out our amenities spaces. So like, for example, I have a development happening right now in Northeast LA, and we're actually going to be putting in a podcast room as one of the amenity spaces. And there isn't much amenity space. It's a smaller building. And the reason that we're doing that is that a lot of those renters are freelancers, and they're working in the freelance industry business. And a lot of it is podcasting or social media, just very different than what traditionally we're used to seeing: lawyer, attorney, doctor, so we try to cater to who our renters are. And for this particular one, I wonder if there was a poll or a study done of, why are they adding the amenities that they are. Most RVers live a very simple, they like the simplicity of things.
And I think that's a great point, and that's so interesting you just brought that up, because we're doing a pitch on a deal right now in Orlando that's a brand new deal out by Disney, and you kind of go for the tour. And my thought is, you've walked in one of these apartment communities, you've already been there, even though you haven't been there. But the amenity that they had there was the podcast room in the clubhouse. And so hopefully that'll be part of the sales pitch. And if we are awarded that deal, I can commit to doing at least one podcast from this podcast room at this property that I'm mentioning. I'm not sure that will be approved, but I'll try.
So the latest wrinkle with the Yacht Haven Park in Marina on July 19th, 2024, was foreclosed by Fortress Credit Corporation in a deed in lieu of foreclosure was completed. It's a 20-acre property. The mortgage amount was $58.1 million, and there was a planned $26 million worth of renovations to be done to the property. So 4,800 linear feet of marina dockage and 255 motor coach sites. So to me, super cool to have anything on the water down there, but 4,800 feet of marina dockage, when that stuff rents by the foot, to me would be a huge barrier to entry and something that would be really fun to be participating in. What else do you know about it, Gelena? You said you thought there was some flooding that happened.
Yeah. So any deal that I do, and even in the apartment buildings that we own, we take our comments, feedback, reviews very seriously. And part of the due diligence that we normally do is we'll look at the reviews online to see kind of what the residents are saying. So if you go through them, several residents had voiced that the park had flooded last year. And so any deal I look through a vantage point. I'm jaded at this point. I've had a lot of stuff that could go wrong. There's beauty in being naive and not knowing what you don't know when you're doing some of these deals. But when I look at this one, as excited as I get, it's so close to the water, and that terrifies me. And weather in Florida is unpredictable. So a lot of those RVs flooded, and the ownership was responsible in maintaining them as part of the package and services that they had offered. And it seems like the only way to ensure that they do not flood again is they have to raise the elevation of the site. How they do that is a civil question, way beyond my pay grade. But I would imagine that the costs to get the park to where it needs to be was just too high. And with floating rate debt, it just was unsustainable.
Yeah, 20 acres, 43,560 square feet, 871. If you had to raise it 3 feet, that would be 290,000 cubic yards of dirt to bring into South Florida. Seems like a pretty expensive endeavor to me.
Yeah. And then
Brett, you're the Florida man. Where do you come down on this deal?
I want to be on the record that I'm in the minority here in Florida, where I do believe in science, and I do believe that the sea water level is rising. So this is a huge issue in Southeast Florida. There's some very, very big institutional capital, which is kind of redline Southeast Florida due to some of these issues, and even in a light rainstorm or kind of a quick 20-minute downpour, you see lots of streets that are underwater for a lot longer than what you would think. And that's not just contained to Southeast Florida. I mean, that's happening in a lot of coastal regions. So, I mean, I think Galena's point is spot on. I think the mitigant to some of that here is that you're not having to insure whole buildings. And I'm surprised to hear that the resort owner was responsible for the RV flooding. My question would be is why wouldn't the owners of the RVs move these things in advance of a storm? But that's neither here nor I don't own an RV, so I don't really know the answer to that question. But I think the waterfront lifestyle, having access to dockage here is a huge, huge win. A lot of people are looking for that. I'm surprised how many people got fancy boats shortly after COVID. You really figured out how many closet rich people they were. But if you're having, so I think insurance, where I'm going with that, insurance on something where there's not a lot of fixed structures, there's not a 300 unit apartment building, I think that would help hopefully reduce some operating expenses from the insurance perspective. But I think being on the water and this setup in Fort Lauderdale would work well. But to Galena's point, setting up the capital stack here would be vital in making sure that the investment was a successful one. And I'm again, don't know much here, but Fortress is 100% in the for-profit business. So I trust they're going to be able to figure that out.
If you had to replace a couple hundred RVs at $500,000 a piece, you're going to have a hard time making friends in the insurance world if you've done it, especially if you have to do that more than once. I think that would be a difficult row to hoe. Gelena, where do you come down on this thing?
No, I mean, as excited as I see all the risks here, the irony in all of this and doing what I do, I'm a real estate developer, is I'm super risk adverse. So how do you become a real estate developer if you're risk adverse? You marry Keith Wasserman, and that's how you do deals. But in looking at this, I don't know of any insurance. Brett, you would know who's insuring in Florida right now. I just had my insurance carrier drop me in Brentwood, and we replaced the roof, and we replaced a brand new building. We gutted everything. They won't insure, and the renewals that we have been able to do across my portfolio, insurance went up like 35, in some instances 40%. I mean, that's just kills you.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, and I think Florida gets a lot of the headlines. And I'm glad you brought up. Well, I'm not glad. I'm sorry to hear that for you guys. But I mean, insurance has been a problem not only in Florida but everywhere. And I think the stat that I heard about Florida was something like, 20% of national insurance premiums are paid out of the state of Florida, but something like 70% of the claims are paid out in Florida. So that math doesn't work. So we were down to one insurance provider for most properties for a couple of years there, which was the state of Florida, which had no wherewithal to cover a catastrophic loss if that were to occur. Now, we've had multiple groups that have filed with the state regulator to get back in the business, but I think so many groups pulled out of the P&C insurance providing business due to what I understand being really the reinsurance market. And so I'm not exactly sure how all that works, but I think we'd all agree more insurance providers in various markets will drive down costs, which is really what we need at this point.
Flip side is one of the great counterpoints to rising sea levels in South Florida would be owning a marina. You're pretty immune to it. In fact, let the whole thing flood and build more slips.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Maybe the value here is doing just that, and not in the RV spaces, or maybe taking the section that is most likely bound to flood without having to raise the dirt of the other piece, which is just cost prohibitive, and add more boat slips. What do you think Fortress is going to do with it?
I think Fortress is going to run it like they have it right now. And but yeah, I mean, this site in particular is core from the standpoint that it's irreplaceable. And just getting boat slips is not as easy as saying, hey, we found this piece of property that's got access to the water or intercoastal or a canal. I mean, you're dealing with Army Corps of Engineers. You're dealing with a lot of different groups to get approvals just for one boat slip. So in terms of barriers.
Click on the ownership opportunities, Brett. What does that do?
Let's see.
This is kind of, these types of things when they get so rare, and you've got when you've got rich buyers or rich owners, being able to sell these things off in a condominium type structure can be an interesting.
There you go, Eric. You get just the pad for $500,000.
Yeah, it's the pad, and they're also selling cottages or airstreams, if you will, that are quasi houses.
Yep. I think right here, right? This cottage, that looks pretty sweet.
Yeah, so they're no dopes. You could do a sellout of just the RV park, and
Do they though? I mean, I assume there's some fees that are paid, and how does that work with their taxes? So how long have they had it?
I think the article was July of 2019 was when Fortress foreclosed on it. So so this is very recently. This was last week.
I'd be curious, how many pads have they sold?
I don't know if we have that info right now. Let me. The article that we pulled up we're not subscribers to it, so we can't get a ton. But I would bet more than people think would be my take on it.
What do you think the seller or the previous owner did wrong? What do you think they should have done different?
I have a feeling they overpaid for it. Because again, this type of lifestyle post COVID was, again, like any place on the water you couldn't get into, right? Any of these kind of higher end resorts, and you pick the place. I mean, it got to be borderline impossible. So, and the RV business probably never had a better 2-year stretch than from 2020 to 2022. And so I would think this did extremely well during the early years of COVID. And so I think this just has to be kind of, we overpaid for it type deal. And now our friends at Fortress are the proud owners of this at 75 cents on the dollar or 50 cents on the dollar, or whatever that ended up being.
Yeah. I think that coupled probably with the debt that they placed here. And I also think that the renovations were really ambitious. And I wonder if they contemplated just doing smaller phases of the renovation and doing a proof of concept. So in other words, let's say that they added boat slips and they said, hey, lender, for this, we're estimating $5 million. And they completed phase 1 and showed the higher NOI, and then did phase 2 and moved on from there. Would have probably been a lot more manageable.
And I mean, just look at how much fun these people are having at this place. I don't know. I mean, I might drive down this afternoon and see if they'll just let me hang out.
I would say too.
Brett at the RV park Tiki Lounge. I love it.
I think this guy's kind of got a body like mine. I mean, he works out at least a little bit more than me since he's doing one rep there. But yeah.
Brett, are employees hard to find in your neck of the woods? Because I know the challenge that I had at the RV park we did in Marina or Monterey is finding staff was brutal. I mean, we couldn't afford to have anybody come out there because the cost of living was so high. I know in Florida is cheaper, but you guys have problems like that?
I mean, I think employment everywhere is a challenge, right? I mean, the labor market, I think, is finally cooling off, but agreed with that. Finding good talent, whatever you're doing, I think has been a big problem. I'd say in Southeast Florida, you have a lot of folks that are maybe younger boat enthusiasts that are saying, I'm just going down there and going to figure it out. I think from an employment standpoint, this would be a cool place for younger folks or folks that are really passionate about boats. Quick sidebar story. My dad graduated from the University of Virginia in 1972, and his parents come down and say, congratulations, what are you going to do? And he said, I'm going to Miami to work on a boat.
That's awesome.
It sounds like a great idea, other than the fact that my dad grew up on a farm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, so he didn't know anything about boats. So I think that lasted about 6 months. But I think for people that, in all honesty, that do know a lot about boats, this is a great jumping off point for people to get on charter or, to work charters that are going down to the Caribbean and thereabouts. So I do think employment at this type of operation in Southeast Florida might be a little bit easier than other places.
I think the big lesson here is if you're going to borrow money from Fortress on a property that has highly variable income, you better bring your A game.
Oh, yeah.
Or you might be given the keys back. I think it's cool. Lot of issues. You've got to be a local pro to do something like this. You got to be really entrenched in the engineering world in the civil engineering world of South Florida to understand how something like this would work, and then layer on it the ability to move in and out of both marinas and RV parks. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of tricks to a deal like this. I think has plenty of upside if you know what you're doing. And in this one, that's not me.
Well, and I just say locations, shockingly, in the commercial real estate business, they matter again, which is really wild that that's come back in vogue. So For a couple of years there, you could have sold a deal on the moon for the same price as you could have on Brickell in Miami, it felt like. But this location, I think, is very, very good. Given the clientele here, you're very close to the Fort Lauderdale airport. And then Las Olas is kind of the kind of high end where all the beautiful people hang out. So I think just proximity to the airport, and it's probably a 20 to 30 minute boat ride to Las Olas. I think those are two very positive dynamics from my perspective. I don't know anything about how you would make this work. But the head of our national manufactured housing team sits in our office here in Orlando, and kind of talking to some institutional capital partners. This is, one of the more favored asset classes in the country, and has been even prior to COVID.
Gelena, you have any parting thoughts?
I just want to say I wish Fortress good luck. I think it's going to be a challenging one, but I'm sure they will figure out maybe some parceling of lots to sell off and get out entirely. But yeah, it'd be interesting to watch to see what happens, and maybe we could all one day visit and meet up there as a follow-up.
I think so. I think that's the least.
I want to see Mr. Wasserman in an RV. That would be a highlight for me.
Mine too. He says it's his dream to take all three of our kids and literally entrap ourselves in an RV with them for a month. He's never driven anything that large, nor have I, or hooked up an RV. So yes, sounds like a lot of fun.
I love it. I'm down if you guys are. We'll go see Brett in South Florida.
You really want to? I don't know anything about that either, but what you do want to know is get the gray water and the black water hookups figured out very quickly.
Yes.
Is what I do know about that operation.
All right, good stuff. I guess that's the pod. Thanks a ton.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening. Thanks, Gelena. Appreciate it. Thanks for being with us this week. For sure.